Babylon is an original epic set in the early days of Hollywood. It's about ambition, it's about excess, it's about hubris, and it's about a society on the brink of massive change. I basically early on became interested in those early days of Los Angeles and Hollywood when they were still getting built and getting kind of figured out. And but the more I sort of looked at that period of time, the more I became aware of just how crazed and insane the people were and the environment was. You know, it was this sort of larger-than-life assemblage of misfits of all stripes who kind of came together to build this city out of nothing, build an industry out of nothing. And there's a certain kind of crazed behavior that comes from that. So I wanted to try to capture in a really unvarnished, unsanitized way just the extremes to which they lived and worked and partied, and what that kind of behavior led to, both good and bad. On a bigger level, I think I just liked the idea of looking at a society in change, you know, and you know, in the case of Babylon, it's a society that's undergoing a change that's both incredibly rapid and really incredibly violent. You know, I remember being shocked when I first started reading just how many suicides there were, kind of all grouped around this short period of time. You know, it gives you a sense of the human cost of this thing, the human cost of, you know, we like to use words like disruption now in a kind of euphemistic or positive way, but, you know, you look at what these people, these human beings went through at this time, and yeah, it puts a face on the damage of that kind of that kind of sea change. The operating principle with Nellie was that she's a force of nature, that she's someone who, you know, just kind of crashes into everything that she encounters, but there's a kind of magic that arises from that. It's part of why she becomes a star so quickly. It's also part of why she in her career encounter problems so quickly. You know, but she's very much, I would say, kind of representative of that real Wild West spirit of the time, where the old rules were out the window. You know, the Victorian age was a memory. World War I had demolished all of that. And here you are in this kind of wide open land of California where, you know, the possibilities seem endless. And you've got this mushrooming town, mushrooming industry where people all over the country and the world are flocking like moths to the flame. There's a sort of collective hysteria and madness that comes from that, and she is absolutely, you know, an embodiment of that. She works hard, she parties hard, she lives hard in every way. What I wanted to do with the movie is try to look at the whole organism as a piece. I mean, there's all these individual characters, but really there's also the sort of macro character of the town, of the industry at this moment in time. And so I wanted to try to, you know, parallel some of these paths. You know, someone who's just rising up with someone who is the sort of current king of the moment. You know, someone who's knocking on the doors, outside looking in, sort of, you know, crossed and contrasted with someone who holds the levers of power at that time. And then you sort of see how these tectonic plates shift, because that's really one of the most interesting things I think that you know, that happened at that time. Jack is sort of the uber movie star. You know, he's the highest-grossing leading man in the world. When we meet him, he's you know, he was very much modeled on that kind of early lineage of you know, male movie stars of that time, whether it was John Gilbert, Douglas Fairbanks, you know, Valentino. You know, there's a this kind of ideal of the romantic leading man, you know, at a time when, again, the whole idea, you have to remember, the whole idea of a movie star was this sort of novel concept. So Jack Conrad, you know, he's one of these guys who has reached the apogee of stardom right at that moment, at that fulcrum, where the kind of love and adulation he inspires is really hard, I think, even for today, for us to fathom. It's near, you know, it's like a near deity. Manny is our eyes and ears. The idea for me was to, you've got a world here that's so larger than life. I wanted to show what it might be like to experience that from an outsider's point of view. So, so the idea of someone who, up till the very beginning of the movie, is kind of peering in from the outside, kind of knocking on the doors, wishing he were in this thing that he's kind of on the margins of, and using him as our as our access point, as our ultimately our guide through the story. Eleanor St. John is a combo, journalist, gossip columnist, fixer, puller of the strings, sort of socialite. She's kind of this sort of reigning dowager empress. At least I think that's how she would describe herself of Hollywood. She's modeled on a variety of people. I mean, most specifically Eleanor Glynn. But also, as you get a little bit later in Hollywood, obviously, people like Luella Parsons and Hedda Hopper, and I think she's someone who I think revels in the power she has to kind of make or break careers and discover people and whatever the opposite of discover people is, sort of make a point of forgetting people. I think a lot of how the movie was structured to me was also just kind of, it wanted to be structured through the idea of these parties and how the parties of LA, of Hollywood, change, because parties can kind of tell you almost everything you need to know about a society. You see who gets in, who doesn't. You see who rules the roost at the party, who doesn't. Within the party, things, people can move up, people can move down. And of course, it's an excuse to get all your characters together if you're doing a big ensemble piece. Her full name's Lady Fei Zhu. She's a actress, singer, performer, title card writer. A little bit of a sort of a Renaissance character, who just kind of wears a lot of hats. Very much like a lot of the people of that time who, might have been mostly defined by one job or another, but really would do a whole variety of different things, either behind the scenes or in front of the camera. Music, of course, has been a big part of silent films in terms of how they were shot, how, you would have mood music on set, you'd go to the theater and music would be playing. But the idea of actually having music tied to the screen, and the idea of what we now call musicals, and putting musicals on screen, that of course, was really a byproduct of sound, and a byproduct also of just the desperation that Hollywood felt right at that moment of trying to figure out some way to justify this invention so it wouldn't be just a novelty. So immediately they turned to what what they deemed the popular music of the time was, what music the kids were listening to, and that's the type of music that Sydney plays. In LA, it was a lot of the kind of music that they would be hearing in Central Avenue, the Central Avenue clubs. This was basically synchronous with in New York, the Harlem Renaissance was happening at this time. So there was this moment for a certain kind of jazz and a certain kind of music that lent itself to what Hollywood thought it needed right at that moment. And so there's this interesting window where just for a matter of a few years, Hollywood started filling short films and even feature films with black performers, black musicians, black actors. There were all black films, famously like Hallelujah and Hearts of Dixie and things like that, and a whole host of shorts featuring people like Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong and Bessie Smith, just trying to reach out to the music, basically the most popular musicians at the time, and trying to kind of yoke them to this new thing of sound cinema. So with Sydney, I wanted to try to kind of tell a little bit of that story, and situate someone who, when we first meet him, is very much in the margins of the film industry and has no real interest in the film industry. He just happens to live in the same city, but he's not at all interested in partaking in this thing called Hollywood. But when sound comes in and he's offered a spot, he might hesitate at first, but ultimately he bites, and we go along the ride. We go along for the ride with him. The hope with this was to sort of demolish the expectations of a period piece, and especially of a movie about old Hollywood, to show that that really on the fundamental level there was no difference between then and now, and you know, I mean, something that happened to me a lot when I was you know, researching or kind of putting this together was, you know, I would stumble upon things that shocked me. I'd stumble upon anecdotes or episodes that would just leave my jaw kind of hanging. That's what I wanted the movie to do, you know, and that's what we don't often get from period movies. Something that can really sort of shock and rattle and take an audience on a real roller coaster ride. That was the hope with this. I think what I was drawn to the most was anytime I would see, you know, an image from the time or from research that felt like it could have been today, you know, or felt like it could have been from 500 years ago, you know, or felt like it could have been from the future. The idea was to try to, everywhere we could, show you something that you would not expect from your own kind of preconceived notion of the 20s. Sometimes that meant fashions that predated the 20s. Sometimes it would mean fashions that seemed to post-date it. But again, everything was rooted in fact. I mean, everything was rooted in the photographic record, the you know, the oral histories, the research, you know, that we all kind of collectively did. You know, we didn't want anything to be anachronistic. We wanted to be true to the time, but we wanted to be true to the time in a way that would completely subvert any expectations. The hope was to have everyone in the movie, whether it's someone you know or someone you don't, feel surprising, feel somehow like it added a new color to the film that wasn't something you were either expecting or something you'd seen before. One of the things that's amazing working with Brad in whatever, you know, I can imagine whatever role. I mean, he's one of the few people today where I think you get some sense of what the old school movie star really might have been like. You know, that sort of larger than life aura that a star of that time could kind of exude seemingly effortlessly. That's the thing with Brad, especially at this point in his career. You know, you don't see the work. It's completely invisible and effortless, and that's part of what's so magical about it. So having him play a movie star of this era and this ilk, yeah, it felt meta in the most beautiful way. But it also felt like it gave us something to actually really collaborate on together, to make it and the performance personal, you know, and you know, to have it be a canvas where he could inform it with his own experiences in a way that hopefully take it beyond just a sort of depiction of a movie star and into something where you really see sort of the raw humanity underneath that. For a role like Nellie, you need an actor who truly has no fear, and can just kind of take the screen as though she's sort of grabbing it by the sides and shaking it to do whatever she wants it to do. That to me is Nellie. That to me is Margot. That's where the two of them sort of merge. I think in many other respects they are incredibly different people, but there's a kind of energy and fervor and hunger that they both share that I think that was something personal to Margot that she was able to tap into. And you know, however she summoned those kind of forces forth, again, she did it in a way that was pretty extraordinary. I've been a fan of Jovan's for a while, but I think what was especially exciting to me about working with him in this role is it felt like he could show a whole new side of himself in this role. You know, Sidney has a swagger to him. He's funny. He's sexy. He's headstrong, and he also goes through a real kind of you know, a real transformation of himself as a person as well. So I needed someone who could tap into that, and Jovan was the perfect person to do it. I did a lot of auditions trying to find someone who could play Faye, and Jun Li just you know, it's like that old school thing. It's the triple threat. You know, she can sing, she can dance, she can act. But more importantly than all of that, you know, she just has this kind of way of completely seizing the frame without seeming to do anything. There's, again, an effortlessness to her that just speaks to old school stardom. So it was really exciting to see that quality in someone who whose work I didn't really know. And I think that's what's going to be really exciting for audiences to discover her. Well, the hope with Babylon was to make something that felt like a ride for an audience, felt like a roller coaster, felt like a carnival, and a larger-than-life circus filled with vivid characters, amazing performances, spectacle, excess, comedy, tragedy, the whole range of experiences, the highest highs and the lowest lows. That was the hope, to try to put it all onto one panoramic canvas called Babylon.
The first time we see Manny, he's dealing with a problem, trying to solve a problem, because that's like what Manny does, or what he's trying to do all the time. Manny is a dreamer. Manny is someone that is trying to find his way, to open his way into the movies. He wants to work in a film set. He wants to do anything related to movies. He doesn't care if he has to clean, if he has to do anything. And our introduction to Manny is probably the most important night of his life. Nelly, she's a starlet. That's how you say it, no? So yeah. Como like a girl that wants to be an actress. And the same as Manny, she just dreamed bigger. She really is not the same as Manny. It's more like she knows she's a star. She's just waiting. She's just waiting for the world to realize. She's looking to go to that kind of parties, to meet a producer, to take a chance, you know? But she's completely confident. That's, I think, is the first thing Manny saw on her. Like, this is a wild, crazy girl, but it's the opposite of me. Manny is saying sorry at the beginning of the movie a lot, because sorry. He's trying to be, like, polite all the time. And then he met this girl that is the opposite. It's not polite, it's completely rude, she's crazy, and she's doing whatever it takes to get what she wants. And I think that's what Manny sees like incredible, like admirable, you know? And that's what he falls in love so fast. It's not only that she's beautiful, it's her attitude, her magnetic power. Jack Conrad is the biggest superstar, movie star in the world, in the silent era. Jack is like a veteran, you know? He's been there like forever. He's very important to the industry. He's someone. And also, he's like the coolest guy ever, right? He's super chill. He's in his element. And he's about to also live a big transition, right? So Manny is very lucky to meet him. And I think Jack sees in Manny right away someone that wants to work, someone handful, you know, useful. I think Manny sees something like a father figure, right? Like a paternal something. But it's still like a working relationship, right? And Jack is a superstar, but also is a little, let's say, he can distract easily, be distracted easily. So Manny became some kind of his assistant in a way, like his right hand. And as I told you, Manny is going to do anything to keep like being close to the movies. So Jack is the guy that finally made Manny's dream came true, that is going to a Hollywood set and be part of the movie-making process. First, it was the first time I had something customized for me. Like, you know, they took like my sizes, everything. She made like all my shoes, for example, at the movie are made for me, but also they are like period shoes with the leather. So she was so careful that it's the leather they used to use, it's the heaviest they used to be, like everything. Even all my clothes, when Manny is like a successful producer, all the fabric is period too. So that's also, I felt like incredible, like so many details, you know? And helped a lot because, for example, we were talking about Manny at the beginning. Probably the shoes Manny is wearing aren't the only shoes he has, right? So he cleaned it every night to look sharp, but they are super old. But for example, the tuxedo is not his. So it's a little big or a little maybe like small for him. So he's not really comfortable, right? So that was super important to play all the first part of the movie, because Manny is actually all the time trying to, how do you say acicalar, like to arrange himself. With this movie, I actually became an actor, finally. This was like my college, in a way. My life is changing every day. I still have to wake up and talk to the mirror for a while and meditate a little and realizing it's happening, it's true, and learning also to feel proud about it, right? And one day at a time, I guess, like Manny. But I'm grateful that Manny showed me what I don't have to do. The choices I don't have to make. I never seen someone so dedicated, so obsessed, but in a good way, with his craft. Someone that prepares everything that much, but at the same time that trusts to his team a lot, with that capacity of bring the talent of a lot of people into one idea, right? And at the same time be super caring about it. Someone that creates something very solid, but at the same time is super flexible to being curious and play, and someone that more than once asked me, like, you want to try your version? How do you feel about this take? I have what I want. Do you want to try something else? And that for me is like a true artist too, because it just brought the best of all of us every day. I never seen also like someone that just don't sleep, or I don't know, he's working all the time, Like I remember him editing in the car. I remember him changing lines in the way back home. It's like I always saw him work. And that's a truly inspiration. And there's no way that if you see someone that is putting all his time, all his heart, all his like talent into it, don't try to follow the same track and be, at the same level. Try to be better every day. So it was incredible.
Robert is not a successful actor. He's an actor, and he's known a bit, but he's not successful. He's not a star. He has no name value. He's just known. And his daughter in this movie explodes. She becomes this thing. And it's hard. It's hard for weak men to have strong daughters. Sound changed the world, and especially in movies. I mean, it changed the world. It changed how you felt in a movie. It changed how you got involved in a movie. It changed everything. And so, before sound, it was a picture, and it was happening, but it didn't go in you like sound does, and reverberate in your body and make you feel the sound of a voice, of a car accident, of a scream, of a gun, whatever it is. And so, sound, it's like when you go through puberty. You start off as one thing and you end up another. Same thing with movies. It is Damien, it is Brad, and it is Margot. This combination of artists is unbelievable. Wait till you see this. And they're just, and they all like each other. So it's they really create together, and they're a hell of a team.
Bob Levine is a fixer. He works for the studio Kinescope Pictures. His boss is Don Wallach, who runs Kinescope Pictures. And Bob puts out fires. Bob deals with problems, whether they're personal or business, or things that need to be done that aren't easily done by businessmen. Such as a girl ODing and having to be carried out, and the body needing to be gotten to the hospital, whether she lives or survives, in a way that's most convenient for the studio, without without bad publicity, without just things that need to be straightened out. An actor needs to be straightened out, someone needs to be straightened out. Bob Levine figures it out and gets it done. The party that opens kind of, the opening of the film after the elephant part, it's out of control, pleasure being the god for everybody, and it's just a wild bacchanal with not a lot of sensitivity to who gets hurt or who doesn't get hurt. People are just going to do their thing and go crazy and get high and let the good times roll, you know, come what may. It's this feeling that anything is doable and anything is possible, and you're protected and you're in a space where it can all happen. And I think for a lot of people, it was, you know, everything that they weren't allowed to do their whole lives, and all of a sudden they're allowed to do it, and not only allowed to do it, but encouraged to do it. Bob Levine is very different than me. But that's art. I really love the artistic process. You know, I'd done things in movies for a long time. I think I did my first one like 40 years ago with Penelope Spheres, Suburbia, and for a long time, I liked that. I love movies. I like the idea of acting, and I would show up and do it. But I did a movie about 7 years ago that resonated with me really powerfully, and I took it upon myself to actually really take the craft of acting seriously and to start studying it and learning it. And I love and relish the opportunity to honor the soul of a character who is nothing like me, and to, you know, find that vulnerability or ugliness or, you know, weakness or thwarted love that makes someone act in a certain way that is, you know, not harmonious with helping, you know, with being a loving person at all. So I really enjoy the opportunity to be someone that's nothing like me. There are so many things about this film that help an actor or help me to get there, you know. You know, like we said, Mary, the outfits, the set design, the locations, and, you know, Damien. He is so clear about what he wants from the scene, like he knows what he wants, and he also gives complete flexibility to light your fire however you see fit. And he's awesome, you know. I'm really, like, blown away by him. I think he's in a zone that's just awesome. You know, in terms of experience and insight and enthusiasm and energy and just this macro picture and all, you know, all the little things. Like, he's really focused in, man. He is dialed in. So all of it, everything is set up for everyone to do their job the best that they can, and it's awesome.
First of all, it's such a great script, and I thought, you know, that period in Hollywood when we're transferring from the silence to the talkies is just fascinating. And of course, you hear the name Damien Chazelle, you think, you know, where do I sign? He's so brilliant, and turns out to be as nice as he is brilliant. My first reaction, though, when I read the script was, whoa, was Hollywood as wild as all that? We have some party scenes that are pretty uninhibited, shall we say. Jack Conrad is Brad Pitt. He's the Brad Pitt of his day. And so, of course, she always wants to sit down and have a chat with Jack about who he's married to that week and, you know, how he feels about his current film he's working on, how he feels about his current leading lady, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So whenever she can get some words in with Jack, that's the coup. That's the big coup. It's interesting, her mentorship of Nellie. I mean, I think she kind of lives vicariously through, you know, the Hollywood people. She's a writer, and writers, you know, sit back and observe. You know, they don't interact as much. When she does get to interact, I think she loves it, you know. But I just think that she thinks this girl is so special and needs her. I think she really feels she needs her. And she likes molding people and molding people's careers and manipulating people to a certain extent. So this is the perfect lump of clay to get her hands on and make her even more beautiful, make her more refined, bring out her talent, bring out that unnameable quality that Eleanor just calls it. She's got it. And Nellie is such a diamond in the rough, really rough. Good costumes always help. Always help. It makes you move differently. It makes you feel differently about yourself when you look in the mirror. It makes you puts you in a different time period in your mind. I mean, or will remind you of characters from books or movies that you've seen that, you know, people underestimate how important that is, you know, and she's, you know, one of the best. I mean, she's stellar, and she's had all of my costumes handmade. Some of the pieces are antiques, and she's had a milliner make all my hats. So that's been really fun. Most people probably don't know much about the history of Hollywood at that time. There's little bits and pieces, you know, Rudolph Valentino and Theda Bara and things like that, but and Flappers or whatever. But I mean, I think to really delve into that time and seeing people who started this industry who only because they wanted to make a movie, you know, they wanted to go out in the desert and set up a camera and make a movie. You know, it wasn't about corporate stockholders and things like that. The people who started the industry, you know, the people who own the industry now are very different people, but to show that kind of entrepreneurial spirit and innovation and the craziness under which circumstances of which movies were made, and how sometimes you'd be making a Western, right, you know, 100 yards from where they were doing, you know, a Roman battle and something else, you know, 100 yards from that, and you know, you realize you had no cell phones, you had no, I mean, how did you make a movie without walkie-talkies? You know, they had megaphones, that was it. You know, I just think people will be delighted, you know, to see that early rough and tumble way it started, because it's become so slick and so high-tech and so glamorous, and to see that it came out of such humble, wildly imaginative beginnings, and then to see that shocking switch to the talkies where it ended careers literally overnight, changed the entire industry overnight.
Sidney is, I think, at his base level, he's an outsider in comparison to most of the characters in this film, and he's a talented artist, a musician, and he's somebody that's always, I believe, always had to have a bit of a chip on his shoulder just to protect himself and protect his personality and the things that he does care about. And in the moments in the film that we are able to see a kind of inside view of who Sidney is, I think it goes by so quickly just because, based off of the conversations Damien and I had about him, we don't want to ever give off too much about Sidney. I think it's fun when an audience gets to kind of try to figure out who this person is. And I think most of the time that we do see Sidney in the film, it's this image that he's portraying to protect himself. But he ends up earning an opportunity in a weird way to get much more exposure and to become one of the first stars that are a person of color, and he's kind of trying to figure things out as he goes along, because there is no one else that he can kind of look at to research and study as far as how to behave and how to carry himself in Hollywood. He's one of the first in this context of the story, so getting to play that, I guess, does give you a bit of creative license and freedom, because in this world, in this universe, he's the earliest, the first. He's before Louis Armstrong. He's before Miles Davis. He's kind of the inception of the musical movie star. That's the thing that's been consistent in his life. Perhaps maybe not love or friendship or companionship, loyalty, whatever, but I know that in his heart, and again, these are among the conversations that me and Damien tried to have about Sidney, is that at the end of the day, he always has his music, he always has his horn. So as much as you get to see Sidney, whenever he's holding the trumpet, I wanted it to feel like that was like a piece of him. And that's something that he wasn't easily ready to, disregard or not pay attention to. I think the biggest obstacle for me was to remain focused, because there were specific shots where Damien really wanted to zoom in on my playing. And if I just let my eyes wander, or if I just took my focus off for a moment, you could run the risk of, one, being out of line of the mark that they really absolutely need you to be perfect on so that the camera's there, or the camera could hit you, which I did not want. I don't think anybody wanted that. So I was trying my best just to center myself and focus. This is a person who's a minority who's coming into a predominantly white industry, and he's, I think more than anything, Manny and Sydney connect just off of the pure hunger of survival and wanting to be able to take care of themselves and to possibly take care of their families. I think Sydney respects that. I don't think Manny's the type of person, at least when they first meet, that's going to try to pull a veil over your eyes. I think he's a straight shooter. He's hungry, and he's intuitive, and he's clever. But I think that there's definitely a connection of respect for Sydney towards Manny, and vice versa, I think. My coach that I ended up bringing on, Dan Fornero, brilliant trumpet player, so brilliant, but more importantly, so patient with me, because it's so hard learning an instrument if you don't read music. So we really had to find a practical way of him transcribing the music for me, which again, brilliantly composed by Justin, who I'm also a fan of. So it's really cool to get to play some of the songs off of a soundtrack from somebody who I've listened to all of his soundtracks. It's really cool. But yeah, we found a number system for the valves, and just being able to learn it by visual memory. So my teacher would play it, on a high definition camera, and it would be in person. I'd be there in person, but I would take the videos home, take the music home, and just have to learn it and commit it to memory, watching it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again until I was sick of the song. And then also being able to understand the breath. When you're playing any brass instrument, any wind instrument, it's really hard to hit certain notes and not breathe. Breath is everything. So you see guys that'll be up there hitting those squeals, and then they can just jump back into like another note without taking a breath. Impossible. And my teacher, or Dan, has been playing 30 plus years, and you can see when he's hitting a note that it still takes so much out of him. So I think that type of preparation was important, because then it enabled me to, we're talking about creative license, being able to adjust how much difficulty I wanted to express playing these songs, because Damien wanted Sydney to be like once in a lifetime type of talent. Like he's able to hit that high C or that transition with half a breath, where the average player would need a breath and a half or 2 beats of breath. He can quick back into it again. So to be able to fine tune it, you have to learn everything. Actors want to be challenged, and they want to be able to showcase an arc. I think if you're playing something one-noted, it would be easy to become bored and less enthused about coming to work every day. But again, to kind of piggyback on the prior question of why I took on the job, is because one, I was getting to surround myself with artists that I really respect, and that I've watched since I was young. But being introduced to new talent as well, and just getting to be involved in something that absolutely needed to be achieved, or could only be achieved with a team effort. You know, it's easy to jump into something and you have like one star, and it's like, well, it lives or dies on that one person. But having a machine where every small piece of equipment needs to work in unison for it to be successful, that's kind of like cool. Like I'd like to be just that little piece right there that helps that piece, that helps that piece, that helps that one, so that we make something beautiful. It's like an orchestra. It sheds light on what we're seeing in real life. I think that it's the opportunity for diversity to be able to bring new aspects and new stories to the limelight. And I think we get a piece of that in the scene where, you know, they're like, oh, what we're hearing, there's a heightened interest in Negroes in films and things like that. I think that can literally be mirrored to the transition of making a conscious effort to tell different stories by different people from different walks of life. And it's just a showcase of what not to do, of not to just do it for the sake of, again, virtue signaling and for the novelty of it, and then tossing it aside and going back to what always works. I think it's always going to be of everyone's best interest to keep things interesting, tell stories that we haven't heard before. Justin knows I'm a fan. And again, me being obsessive and a perfectionist, which is just the worst way to be. It's good because you know that you'll always push yourself, but then sometimes it's to a fault because you just never are satisfied. And I would just always Justin, how was that? Justin, if it's wrong or if I missed a note, I would like to know. And he would be like, no, it's great. And then I'd be like, and he'd be like, oh. He understood, so he would always, if it was beneficial for the performance for him to fine tune one little thing, he would do so. But if not, he'd just be like, Jovan, just have fun, man. Play the music that you know. You've been drilling it enough with Dan. Have fun now. And then once I get to that place, I was right in my sweet spot.
One of the concepts we talked about early on was, what if we used the instrumentation of a 1920s jazz band, maybe a little more modern, maybe cheating it a decade or two modern, just in terms of the size of the band, couple more trumpets, couple more trombones, but basically the lineup of an early 20th century jazz band, but the music, the composition, the kind of riffs, the kind of chord changes, the kind of rhythms, the kind of dance beats, all of that would be much more futuristic, much more modern than the 20s. I think that was sort of the concept. That was one of the early things we talked about. That was a way to thread the needle, to keep us, enough, be enough, to be believable enough in the 1920s, but still without being 20s music at all. Casting the musicians was really important. It's something I've never done before. In the past, I know a few musicians, but I also mostly just take whoever the contractor brings, and sometimes those players are perfect, but for this, there were just a few types of cues. The Sydney cues, obviously, those dance sax cues, couple other things that I just want something very, very specific. I had something very specific in mind, so actually searching for the right people to do that, casting those musician roles was a big part of the process. The sound of Sydney was really kind of cobbled together from 3 incredible trumpeters. And I think that's also what makes it interesting too, is that Sydney is so incredible. Sydney is such an incredible musician, and the breadth of music that he plays is so wide that it took 3 of the best trumpeters in the world to be able to pull it off. It took Sean Jones, Dante Winslow, and Ludovic Lewis all bringing their specialties to be able to just cover what Sidney Palmer plays in this movie. King of the Circus. I love that piece. When Jack comes to burst through the doors of the Wallach party, and it's ho 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 ho. It's all these voices. It's like 30 of my voice, a bunch of other voices, but they couldn't get I had this very specific made up accent and intonation that nobody could get. It's like ho 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 ho, and it was the way you attack the note and then drop and then build back. Ho ho. We got a lot of interesting voices on it that are adding weight and variation to it, but there's a lot of me doing it because it's this very weird made up accent that I could not convey to people. So anyway, King of the Circus, Jack bursts through the door. It's these weird indigenous sounding chants. It's very primal, very this guy he's king. He's the king of the circus. So bringing in a lot of these real, in some cases, or just made up but kind of campy sounds that are exotic. That was part of this score too. There are a lot of things in this movie that they're just not meant to be realistic. And the clacks in Voodoo Mama is something like that, where it's just bigger than life. It's bigger than the band that's in that scene by far. Same for the elephant section of Voodoo Mama. Voodoo Mama, it's driven by the clacks. It's got that trumpet solo, and the track builds and builds and builds, and then it has this huge gear shift. And if you've seen the movie, you know why, because this elephant bursts into the room. So we call it the elephant section, or the circus section of Voodoo Mama. And that circus section is, as far as the movie goes, nothing to do with the band. I mean, the jazz band is still in there, but you got an orchestra, you got violins and woodwinds doing these circusy runs, and you've got these Piatti crash cymbal things that are very circusy, and you got slide whistles and kazoos and party horns and all these sounds. So it's just really a bigger than life ending. And it's one of the things we do many times, where something may start as a band and then build into something else that is that is score and that is so much bigger than what could possibly be in that scene. This is the most complicated score I've put together by far. The amount of tunes we needed across the whole score for the performances, for the score cues, for everything in between. The layers, I mean, the amount of sessions we've done over the past year and a half at studios all over, the amount of players, the amount of options, the amount of, like I said, going and getting like 5 different trumpeters to play this solo, all the like world percussion sessions, all the sort of eclectic and eccentric percussion sounds and party sounds and circus sounds, and putting it all together, combing through it, finding. It's been a really exploratory process, and so you end up with huge hard drives, huge sessions, so many options. We've been mixing the score for 5 months. I think 1920s music it wasn't right for this movie. We wanted music that was more aggressive, that was more in your face, that was dancey and coked up and eccentric, and so I was listening to things like millennial dance anthems. I love those for this movie and for fun. Both good for both uses. I hope they remember the melodies. I hope they remember the tunes. I always love that. That's like the best. Like when somebody hums one of our tunes after seeing the movie or after listening to the soundtrack, if something sticks with them, if the Call Me Manny tune sticks with them, or if the Voodoo Mama thing, you know, do 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 do, if that sticks with them, if any of that sticks with them, that's the highest compliment. That's what we go for is to create music that is going to stay with people, that they could hear 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, hopefully longer, after seeing the movie, and they know what movie it came from. They know that's Babylon, that's the sound of Babylon. I remember watching the movie. That music takes me back to the movie. That's the sound of Babylon.
It's a lot going on, and I think the difference between cinema from back in the day versus what we have now is that more things are going on right now. You know, with silent films, with black and white films, I feel like it's a much slower pace. And it's very hard, I think, for me at least, to watch older films because of the speed. But this script was just, there was so much detail to it that I had to stop, go back, and make sure that I got all of it. And it was exciting, it was exhilarating, it was wild and creative. And I still ask Damien to this day, even though we're halfway through shooting, where he gets his inspirations. I think she is the epitome of strength, of beauty, of grace, elegance, and stillness. And despite all the pain that she had endured being an American-born Chinese and all the rejection that she's faced, I think it's also created who she is. And I always try to remember that I have to balance these two, especially playing this version of who Damien wants to portray. Nellie is just a spitfire of just ball of energy, of raw energy, and I think she is everything that Lady Faye is not, and I think that's why she was very attracted to her, because you see this raw talent, uninhibited, unfiltered, and just I think it's a breath of fresh air for her. My challenge in bringing her to life is I want to play her as authentically to who she's based on as possible. I think the nuance of her history is so delicate because it's so easy to misunderstand some of her numbers as racist or stereotypical, because without context, it can be misunderstood as just that. But I have to make sure that I convey the pain that she goes through and the sacrifices that she has to make in order to be accepted as who she is, and hence the reason why she plays into the fetishization of who she is at that time. So much of it, the attention to detail, the tiny, every single thing, the earrings, the colors, the story behind the fabric, what she wears when, what feelings she's going through, what she has gone through. It's amazing. Every single thing that my character wears in this film, I personally think, and I think a lot of people will agree with me, that she has some of the best wardrobe in this film. Everything has been so beautiful, from the theaters around here downtown LA to especially last week when we filmed in my parents' laundromat. I wasn't even born then, and nor did I ever spend any time in a Chinatown in America during that time, but it could not have felt more authentic, and it brought me right into it. It was so emotional just being on a set like that with my parents. It took not a lot of effort to get there because it was so real. And then my character's bungalow was so beautifully designed. I was emotional at being there. It was amazing. I think Diego is the most perfect actor. He is Manny. I know that it took Damien a really long time to find him, but he has found his Manny. Damien is incredibly imaginative, and he's so visually clear on exactly what he wants and how he wants it to look, and he knows exactly how to communicate that with everyone, including how to speak with us actors when it comes to directions. I love that he pays so much attention to detail, and I love that we have the comfort of knowing that we will never move forward in a scene, in a take, unless he's happy. He's also, on top of that genius that he is, he's also kind and humble and goofy and just so incredibly funny and collaborative. He's just incredible to work with. Such an honor. Jovan's character, Sydney, and Lady Faye have similar struggles. I think that's the core reason of why they are really good friends. They both deal with discrimination, have dealt with it their entire lives and their careers, and that really brings they share the same cynical sense of humor.
I think Babylon had to be filmed. In my opinion, it just had to be filmed. More than ever, I would say, I wanted to approach this film even more sort of impressionistic, meaning I wanted to be more bold with, like, for example, if it's like bright outside, it should be really bright outside, and it should be like overexposed, like more than you should. Like if you read the American Cinematographer's Handbook, it's like we did everything wrong. It's like we didn't really follow any rules, and we treated the film dramatically. It's as overexposed you can be on film stock. We shot like that, like we treated the film that way, and to get an impressionistic attitude for those scenes. And then in other instances, we would just underexpose it dramatically, and altogether the whole film was push processed because we wanted more contrast, more color, and there was sort of no other way in my mind to get to where we are with Babylon without shooting it actually on anamorphic 35, push processed. Just shooting on film will help the scene with actors, but the relationship between you and the actor when we're shooting, I find that when I meet actors in the beginning of a shoot and they realize we shoot on film, they're always light up, and they're like generally always happy and want to talk about how great it is that we shoot on film, and they love it, and for different reasons. Usually they feel like they look better on film, but I think everyone focuses better when you shoot on film, and when the clap goes, it's just It's more quiet around. I think for everyone it's just better, actually. Every scene is engaging too, like from the beginning to the end, and Damien has sort of that great ability of sort of visual storytelling. He's a really visual storyteller, I think, as well as he's a storyteller in general, like a genius. But when it comes to the work for me with him, he can always see clearly how the story should be told, and it is in a musical way, right? He has a musical mind. He thinks of the edit already on set, and the way we sort of design shots are usually not coverage. It starts here and ends here, so it's always a visual storytelling. You know, it's always a visual journey for the audience, which I think really helps the movement of the film too. Like it's always a forward motion. Definitely, please go to the cinemas, because it is a film about cinema, and when you've seen the film you realize why you should watch movies in general and why you should watch them in the cinema, and the film has to be watched. You have to see it in the cinema, please. That would be really, really important to me.
It really was the beginning of Hollywood in every way, you know, the parties, the decadence, the fame, just the craziness and the ups and downs, and it reflected throughout the rest of Hollywood history. You can see it now and back then, and it's beautiful to sort of see that beginning of it, you know, and be part of creating making a film about it. It's pretty awesome. The Wilde Party is the most decadent thing I've ever seen ever on film or anywhere else. It was insane. I mean, people falling from the rafters, you know, sex and drugs and every kind of drug and sex and craziness that you can imagine, elephants and just total nuttiness. It was really amazing to see it happen, and the choreography, everything about it is just like phenomenal and hard to believe. Actually, being there was like, you felt like you were actually witnessing a moment in history. Not then, but now. Like, it was that intense of an impression. It's typecasting, it's true, there's a lot of that. It's very meta. The whole movie is super meta. But, and it's typecasting in a certain way, but, you know, Brad elevates it. So it's all sort of elevated. It's bigger than life, and it's like the essence. It's like the sort of the pinnacle of the idea of a movie star. And he really inhabits that in such a beautiful way. And I think, can't imagine anyone else being able to actually inhabit it the way that he does, it's pretty amazing to get to watch it. Anyone wants to live in the status quo, and they're doing great as it is, so he doesn't want anything to change. Jack, on the other hand, wants to embrace it. I mean, he loves the idea. He wants to bring the art, you know, to the next level. But George is just a money man. He just wants to get the movies made, and he wants to stay in his lofty position. So it definitely changes everything. Manny is just he's like a runner. He's like an assistant, and Jack sort of takes him under his wing. He really likes him, and he introduces him to George, and George gives him a couple of assignments, basically, and Manny passes him with flying colors. You know, he kills it for him. So, you know, George is all for it, and Manny's a real sweet guy. He's there for whatever they need, and Jack loves him. So if Jack loves him, George loves him. George is an interesting fellow. I mean, his manic depressive nature makes him one minute he's really happy, one minute he's really sad, and the way that it works best is when he's kind of I play him pretty big, you know, which is really unlike me. I'm a subtle actor. I'm like in dramas, and I tend to be sort of very serious when I'm working. But in this movie, I get to really play and try things that I would never try. And Damien encourages it so much, and he's such a playful director, and he's so creative and in the moment and ready to try new things and experiment and just go off on a tangent, and like he'll just give you a take or two to just do anything, anything. So playing George Munn has been exciting, and I've been a little nervous about it because I'm not used to kind of going there like that. But it's been a really fulfilling and beautiful experience. With every actor, whatever the meta aspect is, they really transcend that within the character itself, and Brad is the example of that. I mean, he's got a certain presence and charm on set, and the nuance of the different levels that he goes through the arc of his character. I mean, it's really beautiful, and he's, I mean, what can you say? It's Brad Pitt, and he's killing it. Diego is soulful and artistic, and he's a lovely, lovely person, and he's connected. Like, he connects to each scene in such a fundamental, beautiful way. I think he really holds it down. And he's the heart of the film. And he's doing such a beautiful job. It's really a joyous thing to get to watch because, it's his first big movie like this. And he's really taking it in stride, and he's worked very, very hard. And he's a real professional, and he's incredibly talented, and I think he's bringing a whole lot to that character. Damien is saying a whole lot. I don't know if he has a particular idea in mind in terms of what he's trying to say. I think he's giving us a portrait. He's reminding us, he's reminding us of where we come from, in particular movie makers and actors and everyone in his industries, reminding us of what we come from, and showing us how quickly things change. This movie is poetic, it's happy, it's sad, it's funny, it's poignant, it's dark, it's all these different things that life is, all these little aspects. And I think that's what is really extraordinary about Damien in particular as a director, because he embraces all of that stuff, and in an incredibly beautiful, creative way that's super rare. You don't get to see that. I have barely ever seen it in my 38-year career, whatever it is. I've barely ever seen it.
This journey of the script to me was surprising indeed, because it's a Hollywood I hadn't seen before. I don't think most people have. We all know there was a silent era. We all know that talkies came in. We've seen that story depicted in one way or another. But we've never really understood what it was like, what it felt like, what the texture of this society was, what it felt like inside. And Damien takes us there. He takes us to Hollywood, Los Angeles, 1920s, which was a very open society, a very free-spirited society. It was the Wild West, really. Damien always has the movie in his head, literally frame by frame. But he does have a unique and exquisite talent of marrying camera to his story, marrying design to his story, integrating all those disparate pieces into the way he tells the story in every frame. Damien has a great eye. His production designer, Flo Martin, has an extraordinary eye. And so recreating the feeling, the texture, the dust, the heat, the desert, the orange groves, all of that, we were able to do with some really innovative thinking and really smart location finding. What's really interesting about LA, both in the city and in the outskirts that I allude to, is that there are still present buildings, edifices, architecture of the time. So if one can find that street corner with the right architecture and look in a certain direction and the palm trees are there, you can literally be transported back to 1920s. The immersive quality of this film, the cinema, the sheer cinematic language of it, the sound, the music, the visual, is in fact immersive. And the experience of seeing it on the big screen is going to be unlike any other. Reading the script, it was hard not to envision that the perfect marriage of actor to role would be Brad Pitt to Jack Conrad. He's a character that really believes in what he's doing, but he does so with a sense of humor. And he has no pretension about him, even though he has pretension in a way that for which we have great affection for him, because he believes in his art form, even though some of what he is really, because of the silent era, just a very, very handsome face. And there is something meta about Brad Pitt playing a character like that, and yet it's a character you haven't seen Brad play before. When we speak about perfect marriages of actor or actress, in this instance to a role, I can't think of anybody but Margot who possesses the same kind of fearlessness in how she approaches all her roles, but how she approached the role of Nellie Leroy. She threw herself into it so completely, which is necessary to pull off a character who is completely unbridled in her lust and her drive for success, for life, to live on the extremes as she does without a care in the world, to be in your face, and yet to have enough of a soul underneath that we root for her, despite all her bawdiness and aggressiveness. And not only was Margot fearless in creating this role, in bringing to life what was on the page in a way that I can't imagine anybody else, she was also just such a professional in the way she approached it. There was no task too great, no direction too daunting, no turn she wouldn't take to explore this character, to take her to her limits, because it's a character who lives out on the limits, but does it on her terms. And Margot is breathtaking in the role. The character of Manny is literally the eyes of the audience. He's someone who's an outsider trying very hard to get into Hollywood. And that's very aspirational for many people. We're all sort of hooked on celebrity and Hollywood and storytelling. And so he has this presence, and he talks to us with his eyes in a way that was very appealing, very relatable, and very accessible, because Manny has to be very accessible. He's also very authentic to playing a character whose family crossed the border from Mexico, who's an outsider, trying very hard to fit in, to find his niche, to find an opportunity, which is what the character does. When audiences go to the theater, because it will be an event to go to see this sprawling film, and it will be so satisfying and so unlike anything they've experienced before, that it will be one for the ages, I think, and one that demands to be seen in the theaters, to be experienced, and to be remembered in that way.
It is a film about making film. It is a film about a real transition in cinema history, and it's also approaching it in a way that no one's done before. No one has ever depicted that time in Hollywood the way this film does. And I think people are going to be really shocked. I mean, I was shocked when I started doing my research, because I think you think of the 20s as being quite, buttoned up and Charleston, and, we've seen that depicted on screen in a very polished way. And actually, it was just such an insane and debaucherous time. It was just wild. She's an aspiring actress. She kind of catapults into the film, and she is trying to get into a Hollywood party, and she's not on the guest list. She's not invited, but she is going to get into that party no matter what. And she's just arrived in Hollywood and she's going to be a big star. She knows she is. She knows that's what she was destined for. But she comes from nothing, and you know, she's going to take it. She's not going to let anyone stand in her way. And she meets Manny, Diego's character, who helps her get into the party. And that kind of kicks off their relationship. They keep crossing paths, and well, you'll see. It's madness the way they used to shoot back then, out in the desert in broad daylight, because there's no sound. It was like a cacophony of noises. You know, it's so different. And which, of course, in the movie you then see how different things are once you enter, you know, the stages and the studios, and you have mics, and everything has to be so quiet. But to begin with, it's like it's all blaring, harsh sunlight and crazy noise, and all the sets next to each other, all filming at the same time, and that's how they used to do it. And you know, pouring asbestos for snow and whatever, and you know, it's just madness. I think there's something just innately pure about Manny, and Nellie senses that the very first time she meets him, and I think it's the way he looks at her, kind of like from the night they meet. He kind of looks at her like he loves her and would do anything for her. And I think the selfish part of her recognizes that could be helpful for her, and then I think the hopeful part of her kind of recognizes that no one's ever really looked at her like that, with like a pure kind of love, not kind of a destructive kind of need or desire. So I think she knows deep down that Manny will always look after her or do whatever he can. When you're acting, knowing that you're shooting on film and knowing how rare that is these days to get to be able to do that, it feels so special. And you see this in Babylon, you can literally hear when a roll of film rolls out. Like there is this, it's just magic, because you just want to give everything on that take, and you know, before you start a take, they'll say how many feet have we got left, and they'll shout out, okay, we've got such and such amount of feet left, you know, of film. Can we get a whole take for that? No, we'll never make it. Okay, take it from that line. Okay, go. Are we rolling? I mean, there's this moment, there's this feeling of like, we have to get it now, and it's going to be printed on celluloid forever. Brad is exceptional in this film. I mean, I'm a huge fan. He's exceptional in everything. But there's something really special. And maybe it is that thing of like seeing an actor play an actor that feels like a little bit like you're seeing, I don't know, it's like you're seeing behind the curtain or something. And he's such a movie star in real life, and he's such a movie star in this film. But he's also, the character is incredible, and he does incredible things with it. But he really says the things, his character says the things that I know Damien feels about the film industry, and about, that we all kind of feel, you know, why it's special and why it matters, and he articulates it. Jean's exceptional in this film, and we all know she's a brilliant comedic actress, and so you get such pleasure out of all those little quips, those moments, and her accent and all the stuff she's doing. You just eat it up. It's so good. But then her dramatic moments are just I can't think of another scene in a movie I've seen in any recent decades that has hit me in that way. It's so impactful and special, and she delivers it beautifully. Lady Faye has this composure that Nellie is never, ever, ever going to have. And I think it's so perplexing to Nellie that she can be all these things and then hold it so still at the same time. I think stillness is something that Nellie is just never going to achieve. So there is something so intriguing and magnetic about Lady Faye. And Lily is, Lily's done Broadway. I mean, obviously she can sing and dance. She's exceptionally talented on a lot of different levels. But she brings that energy to Lady Faye that just really sets her apart from all the other characters in the film. So many of us are running around like chickens with their heads chopped off. It's just madness all the time. Even Jack Conrad as, Brad's character, even as smooth and suave as he is, he's still like a loose cannon. Like he's still, he's still like insane and in these insane relationships all the time and just like, getting drunk all the time and all this kind of stuff. But Lady Faye is just badass. Was it worth it? Oh my God, yeah. I think it will be the thing I'm most proud of in my entire life and my entire career, but also my entire life. And the biggest challenge, I would say, was just having the stamina to be Nellie. Like, she is so exhausting. And I've played exhausting characters, and I know I can... I have good stamina. Like, I've worked with directors who do 20-hour days and make you improv the whole thing, and I've worked with directors who don't give you a script and push you to the brink, and I've worked with all kinds of directors, and I love it, and I know that I can handle it. I'm never like, oh no, I can't. I'm going to be too tired to act today. Like, I know I don't have that mode. I can keep going, but Nellie is the hardest character by far that I've ever played. Oh my God, Damien is the greatest. He is one of the greats of our generation. He is an auteur. I'm so lucky I got to work with him. And he is like our Scorsese, our Fellini, he is that. He is one of those greats. I have an endless... He is the first director that I ever felt like I was let off the leash with, too. And maybe it's because it was this kind of character. If we did a different movie together, maybe it would be different and our process together would be different, for sure. But having him, and the way he feels about this film and about making this film and about writing Nellie and the way I wanted to play Nellie, it was just, like, explosive. And it was the first time I felt like I went pedal to the metal. Like, I've never really put my foot completely to the floor. It was like, yeah, and he let me do that, and I was be forever grateful for that he let me really, really go for it and expected so much of me. I love that. It's an eyeful. Yeah, you're going to see things on screen where you're going to be like, are they allowed to do that? Because I remember when we were shooting it, I was like, surely we're not allowed to do this. Like, surely this will never make it on screen. Not in this day and age. You can't do anything anymore.
It felt very big in scope, but it felt like a lot of fun, too. Like a really interesting project to take on. So I just remember thinking that it's very big and it had a lot of working parts, but being really excited by the challenge of it. So and it wasn't until later where I heard actual numbers that put, an affirmation stamp on that initial reaction that it was going to be the largest film I've ever pretty much taken on. There was probably close to 1,000 speaking part costumes, just the speaking parts, and then 7,000 background. So that's a lot of costumes for one film. And very different types of characters for the speaking parts and the principals, and very different sort of episodes of genres that we did for different scenes. Like, there was never like, oh, this is another scene where there's a lot of pedestrians, so to speak. They were like capsules of, this is this look, this is this look, this is this look, this is this look, and there were not a lot of repeats or ability to share one look to another look. And that was part of the great part. That was part of the great part of it, and it was also part of the challenge. It was a lot of research about the underbelly of Los Angeles and the underbelly. And we was primarily stuck with Los Angeles, but I found like there were research material that came from all over the world to just give us inspiration for certain things. And a lot of silent films, looking at silent movies and watching them over and over again to like look at the craftsmanship of what and how they made those costumes. And so it was infinite, the amount of research we did. And I could still be researching the movie now, and we're almost finished shooting. Like, I could research this movie for the rest of my life, and I would still find things that are really interesting that we could have used as inspiration. But yet at a certain point, you had to stop. She has a persona that she performs in, and then she's like what she wears to Don Wallach's, and that's to me is strong, and it's kind of who she is, and it's kind of ballsy. Then there's the performance wear that she wears when she's asked to do parts that she probably not necessarily wanted to take at Kinescope, and it's a lot more revealing and a lot more vulnerable. And I don't think that would be necessarily her choice of what she wears. And then what she chooses to wear in her real life is strong and it's sexy, but it's not necessarily revealing. It's classic and just sort of has a lot of style. And so I think to me that's the real woman, and that she was just like, she was living in the world that she lived in, and that's where they wanted that Asian American actress to be. They wanted her to be in these sort of subservient kind of costumes that would put her in a place that was not equal to other whites and other Americans and other women. And so it's subservient in some level. And so, but in her real life, she doesn't take any punches in her real life. And was the dichotomy in her closet for me. Like, that's how when she chooses what she wears, it's poised and elegant, and it's who she is. It's not who someone else is telling her to be. Some things we were inspired definitely by Clara Bow, and some other just period research that we found. There was a picture of Clara in overalls. She did have something on underneath, but we also found another photo of a woman without anything on underneath the overalls, and that was something I was like, we need to try this on Nellie. So we found like a vintage pair and recreated, fit perfectly the way that it needed to fit and cover what it needed to cover. But and that we ended up using at the pool party. We figured out Nellie together. I really believe that, and she was open to all avenues. But I feel like we discovered Nellie. I know that she did a lot of work on her own, but I know that we did a lot of discovery of the character of Nellie in the fitting room. For sure, because it was very helpful. And she's one of the most intuitive actors I've ever worked with, and so nice and so lovely and just smart as a whip. And she knew her character inside out and would come up together. We came up with a lot of solutions, but a lot of times she's very production and filmmaker savvy. You try to find something that feels timeless and contemporary almost, and relatable, and that is also something that could very legitimately come from the 1920s. Absolutely. It just makes it so it doesn't feel like this is this precious thing that we're looking at, and there's a way to let the audience in, because it's something that that's not that offhandish sort of period veneer. It's something that's like visceral and relatable. And yeah, I mean, there's no reason why someone couldn't wear what Nellie wears to the Wally party to a club today. It's awesome. We both said, I don't think he's the type of character that is very formal all the time. Like, I don't think on the days where he shows up to set or when he's looking at footage, it's not always that he's in a suit, and certainly not a tie. I think he owns it, and he's much more casual than that. And like, when he dresses up, he's in his tuxedo, but it's not like he inhabits his life in suits and ties and in a formal way. We sourced fabrics from all over the world, but mostly Europe. We sourced fabric from Europe, and then we found a lot of great fabric in Los Angeles and in New York. We did find some domestically too, but the suitings for the men primarily came from overseas. Like, they just don't weave it in the United States anymore. And we were looking for very heavyweight suitings, which nowadays if you bought a suit today, it would be maybe the heaviest would be like a 9-ounce. And I was looking for 12, 13, 14-ounce wools. And so to source those, we had to go overseas. His ideas of the character arc of Manny were he knew him inside and out. And we were very much in agreement on how he starts, and that Manny is a man of very little means, and he doesn't have a ton of clothes. And I think that he wears he wears a pair of black pants and a white shirt. He doesn't have a tuxedo shirt. He wears just a white button down, and he has somehow gotten his hands on a tuxedo jacket and a bow tie. And that's how he cobbles together his look for the Wallach party. But we see him without the jacket and the tie in the very beginning. And he wears those pants and that shirt. I mean, we have multiples of them, but he wears that through his whole arc while working for Jack. Like, he gets one sport coat and one overcoat. And we had another sport coat, but we never ended up using it because it just felt like he's not making that much while he's working for Jack. And so it was the choice of like the lack of clothes for him, or the lack of new clothes for him, and also the structure of the clothes. I think that part of it is the love of filmmaking and the love of film, you know, and showing that there was in the silent movie era, there was true art was being made, and people were allowed to like express themselves in a way that got a little bit squelched in the beginning of sound. And so, I mean, this is, I've never spoken to Damien about this, but it's like, it's this love of film, like what's happening now in terms of what studios and what filmmakers are making. Like, there are people who are still making movies that are about people and life and the way that Babylon is, but there's also a lot of other static in the universe about what sells a lot of tickets. And not that we don't want this movie to make money, but I mean, I think that this movie is about making art. I think it's just going to be a visual and emotional feast. You're just going to sit down and go on this ride, and when the film ends, you're just going to be like, what just happened? Wow. Can I go see it again?
Between us and the ideas and our goals, which is frankly tied to who we are as people and as friends and as cinephiles and as filmmakers, it was just a dream. Honestly, Babylon is a dream from born of two young cinephiles who love movies who go, wouldn't it be amazing if we could do something about that time, because it's never been done in a way that quite represents how amazing it was. But then you build a script and you end up with something and you go, I don't know who's gonna make this or who would jump in on this movie. And ironically, it was that thing, the impossibility of it, that I think was attractive to people. Actors going like, I have no idea how you're going to pull this off, but I just want to be a part of it. That's really cool, and that happens very rarely. Justin and Damien went to the ends of the earth to find also examples of different musical styles that were popular at the time, a lot of different cultural influences. Again, that speaks to Los Angeles culture in the 20s, the cultural influences from all angles that you wouldn't necessarily think. Was it that populated with, sort of an immigrant community that had an influence on the music in that way? They dug up all of that stuff in order to present something that was an alternative to your standard 20s jazz, Bob and Charleston stuff. My own personal experience of watching Margot work every day was feeling like I was watching history, honestly, that I was in the presence of today's premier movie star, man or woman, doing things at a level that is generational. And you never have those moments you rarely have those moments on a movie set. Watching Margot play Nellie every day, I just felt like I was watching something special that I would talk about for the rest of my life, honestly, for the rest of my life. And set a bar for every other actor that I have the fortune to work with.
I'm still pinching myself that I get to be a part of this. I mean, to get to work with a filmmaker like Damien is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, I think. And not only Damien, but then the people he surrounds himself with. I do feel like a kid in a candy store, and I get very starstruck. I mean, today I was just now I was doing off camera, and I was like this close to Linus, and I was like, I can't believe this is happening. So it's a really unique thing to get to do something like this, and then also to play a character who has such significance in film history. It's all been kind of too good to be true. In this movie, I think Thalberg represents a kind of Machiavellian-like omnipresence. Like he's not in the movie a lot as a sort of physical presence, but you always sort of sense him. And I get a slightly malevolent feeling from him in the context of the narrative. Maybe I'm being protective of Thalberg. I don't know if that's how. I don't see him like that in real life. I have a very glamorized, I think, picture of him, and I see him as sort of this just incredible sort of prodigy, and his influence on movies was so impactful and special and sort of unmatched to this day. So I hold him in the highest regard. At the same time, obviously, this is a work of fiction, and I did feel that the script was asking for him to have something somewhat villainous about him. The way that Damien works is, he's the most observant director I've ever worked with. He sees every little thing that you do, and that gives me a tremendous amount of security as an actor, because I know that he's not missing anything. And it makes me feel like everything's being curated. And honestly, I think what that does is takes a bit of the responsibility off myself. I know that I'm in a director's movie and he has a true vision for what he wants. It's a true piece of escapism, and like one of those wonderful movies that takes you out of your real world and your real problems, and allows you to like go on a journey. That's all I'm ever looking for when I put something on. I want to be taken away from my reality and into somebody else's. And I think this movie does this so beautifully, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, and it'll make your grandparents uncomfortable, which is always the best kind of movie.
I just had no idea that Hollywood was actually like this, that the 20s were actually like this. And it took Damien showing me the source material, the photographs of the actual events that inspired his writing, to believe that it actually was that insane, that debaucherous, and that free. None of the characters in the movie are real people. Maybe Irving Thalberg is the closest we had to that. But they are all, and all the stories and all the people are all inspired by real events. And our goal was to kind of capture the spirit, just the world of that time period, but we didn't want to be constricted by being perfectly truthful to any individual story. It's somewhat similar going into it, and what ended up being the biggest challenges, which is just the size of what we were trying to make. I mean, it's a long script, it's a massive, every department was like, I've never had this many locations. I've never had this big of a cast. It was just, everybody was having the biggest meal they've ever had. And so that, wrapping your arms around the size of it, and staying focused and being able to actually execute well across everything to Damien's standards, which he was unwavering about, was the biggest challenge. It was pushing people to the limit in every department, so that was hard. I have been a huge Diego fan and believer, and I think Diego has a lot of the real character Manny in him. He has that purity and that hopefulness, and that he's a real artist. He's very, very dedicated and takes his work very, very seriously. The more you get to know him, the more you realize how intense he is about the work, and he's the real deal. Diego's the real deal. It wasn't like every other director was a woman. It just wasn't such a big deal the way it is. It wasn't like, in the female director, it just was, because at that time period, it was like whoever could pick up a camera was a cameraman. It wasn't so
focused on the identity of who was doing what. It just, if you had the skill, you could do it. But the people I used in my research, I wouldn't say they had their careers handed to them. Like everybody at that time period had to hustle and work and prove, you know, the way that Ruth Asner, for example, got her first movie. She basically had to blackmail the studio into giving her the chance to direct. You know, it wasn't like anybody, women or men, just got things handed to them. So only the scrappiest and the hungriest made it. Damien, as you know, and I are very passionate about the theatrical experience. And so our only goal at the moment is to make movies that people will see in the theater. Babylon in particular, just the scope and the scale and the, I mean, it's an original epic. It's something that I hope people will remember the first time that they saw it. And I think that having that experience and that memory be in a big movie theater with a big audience that you're experiencing it with is the only way to do it. My greatest satisfaction is Diego Calva's performance. It's that we found Manny. It's so gratifying and exciting to take an actor that people don't know and have him play such an incredible role and deliver in such an incredible way. I think I take a lot of pride in all of the performances that we captured, and everybody's work, I guess, beyond just the actors, but the crew and everybody, just how it all turned out. I think Damien makes everyone look good. I think the music is a standout part of this movie. It's something that we hope people, you know, will dance to and will listen to at home and not, you know, just put on during a theme party. It's remarkable. I mean, Justin has been working on this music, you know, from even before we began shooting. You know, he focuses only on these Damien movies as his sole focus. So I think you feel that in the work.
Damien had some references of what he was thinking for McKay, and then as I was learning about the blockhouse and you know, people wore different things, masks and makeup, and so that some of that, like the makeup that James McKay applies, is part of the you know, fun and sort of dress up of being in that environment, and working with them with the hair, makeup, costume, all of that, like putting McKay together, which also obviously Damien, all of us just talking about it, and we would try different things and walk around, and it's really interesting because it's as much forming like my performance as anything. It's, you know, doing the hair and makeup and putting the clothes on and walking around. You start to feel certain ways. But it was, I don't want to say it was easy exactly, but it just, everybody's ideas were good and we were just coming together, and the look came together pretty quickly between Damien's vision of it and then all of us, you know, collaborating on putting it together. The costume definitely brings like a real feeling of authenticity, which is so helpful. And actually with the costumes, we really explored pretty different ideas. And then ultimately what we ended up with, which I don't know if we had like 5 or 6 pretty different or distinct looks. And that one that we put on just, for me, felt like, yep, this is it, and all of that, and you know, it's not one thing, but the costumes were really helpful for me in building the character, inclusive of feeling authentic about the period, which of course also being on the sets were a big part of that too. It was amazing working with Linus and the way Damien and Linus approach both for them and the kind of movement and energy of you know, what you're getting on the side when you're looking at it. But as an actor walking through, there's just so much freedom. It's really loose, which is amazing because of again, the ambition, like how much we would have to get done. But we would, I don't know, we just had a lot of freedom and, both be very detailed and specific, but then a lot of range to explore. And I'm just amazed with that kind of energy that they're approaching shooting it with. And then editorially, it'd be amazing because there's just different sort of different rhythms to the editing that were just amazing to watch. I mean, again, making it just felt great. Like I really enjoyed how they would shoot. And then watching back, you could see where that looseness would translate, but it could also get like extremely tight and precise with the way it was cut. Really appreciate just witnessing all across the board the filmmaking, because it was very special. So I was partnered with Marc Platt, and we had a production company, and Damien and Matt had a relationship, a previous relationship, and I ended up getting in touch with Damien, and we were all chatting, and Damien was sharing his, I don't know, I guess like early images that he would see or sequences that he would see in the film, and then we were helping Damien, firstly just like with research and organizing what it is that he wanted to do. And then Matt and Damien worked very closely in developing the script that Damien was writing. And I was, I was a support. I was there to do whatever I was asked to do, which would sometimes be talk with Matt a little bit about what was happening in the development of the story, and other just sort of like research support things for Damien as he went along. He's a great filmmaker, so that's one thing. He's really a joy to work with, and he's really striving to make, in this case, this extremely ambitious, epic, wild story, and he's certainly dogged in his pursuit of that. He's kind of the process and the kind of rigor that he's just going over and over and over within himself and his work through the whole process, whether it's researching, writing the screenplay, shooting, which obviously you're limited with the amount of time you have, so there's a certain movement, and his adaptability, his like troubleshooting, problem-solving adaptability. But within that, as an actor, I could be really creative and play and try things that, I don't know, in some cases I wouldn't try because I've got to deliver what's needed for this scene to work. And this, I just didn't feel that. I just felt like I'm going to just go play and see what happens. It actually moves me when I think about the number of people that worked on this film and how hard people worked to make this happen. I feel really grateful for that, and it's a beautiful thing.
Damien always talked about telling his story and making this movie and having it be about excess and having it be about decadence. And when he spoke to me about the editing, he really wanted the editing to support that. And that meant that the editing would be overt, and it would be stylized. It would do a lot of heavy lifting. So as an editor, that's very exciting because we don't often get the opportunity to work in different styles and do certain things stylistically. But also, I had an idea that it was going to be a big job. There was going to be a lot of cutting and a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of moving parts. So I was both excited at the prospect, but also a little afraid. The thing he talked about with Babylon was that this was going to be a true ensemble. That's what he hoped for the movie. This would be a true ensemble. So in a way, it was much more challenging than the previous movies we had done together, because with the previous movies, we could essentially boil things down to the two-hander. This, we couldn't do that. This really was, how do you find the way to tell the story and not lose sight of each one of these characters? All of them were, to Damien, were equally important. And they all sort of played off of each other. One person's storyline hinged on another person's storyline. So we couldn't do what we had done before, which was kind of distill in a certain way where it really came down to one character or two characters. This was something that we knew out of the gate was going to be more complicated. With the scenes with Jack Conrad on the hilltop, the battle scenes, I think we had these amazing performances that we could always lean on, that we'd always go back to. Spike Jonze playing the maniacal director, Jack Conrad, Manny watching Jack. I think all of these things were the heart of that scene, of that section. So in a way, every time we went back to that, we knew we could always lean on those characters. And so the idea was, as long as we didn't lose those characters, and those characters include Jean Smart playing Eleanor, who's kind of taking notes and watching this through these opera glasses from afar. As long as we always checked in with our characters, we knew that we'd be keeping it honest. We knew that we would not just be reveling in spectacle. The spectacle was meant to kind of tell part of the story, but the real story was with the characters. So as long as we didn't stray too far from the characters, we could kind of keep everything under control and keep everything in check. I've been very lucky to get to work with Damien and collaborate on movies that feature incredible characters that he's written and created, and also feature incredible performances. And one of my favorite scenes in that way is the scene with Eleanor and Jack in Eleanor's office. Jean Smart and Brad Pitt give these two amazing performances. And that was a scene that was very different than a lot of other things in the movie. Again, I've mentioned, Damien really wanted Babylon to be about the excess and the decadence. And it's certainly about that in the content, in the story, but he also wanted the editing and the storytelling to be very stylized, very big, which is why it's a movie told with montages and cross-cutting, parallel cutting. But then, he also wanted to be able to slow things down and have room for these quiet, meaty scenes. And the scene between Jean Smart and Brad Pitt was one of those scenes, one of my favorites. That's something as an editor, you just try to stay out of the way of the actors. You try to help the characters by showcasing certain moments and certain reactions. And in that way, it was abundance of riches, all the dailies coming in. I mean, every piece of coverage of both of them was really fantastic. So, it was really an abundance of riches. But it really is, it is a matter of trying to be there and support in terms of stay on this performance a little bit longer because something amazing happens. Stay on this longer so that their eyes can meet, so that the characters really feel like they're connecting. But really, it's about staying out of the way. You want the editing to be invisible in that scene because all you want to be left with is what the characters are saying and how they look at one another. Diego Calva was incredible to watch as the dailies came in because he immediately had this presence. I mean, he could kind of own the screen. You could just, you know, there were moments where I would just want to stay on him and not cut. I just want to stay on this look he was giving. And there was something in his eyes. I think great actors have it. They can own the screen. And I was really delighted and amazed that, I mean, it was beyond my wildest dreams where Diego could do that. And he could do that in scenes with Brad Pitt, with Margot Robbie, with Samara, you know, with all the characters. He could kind of hold his own. And that's a unique quality, and not every actor has that. A lot of actors don't have it, but some of the best, you know, in my experience, some of the best definitely have it. And Diego, he just has something, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of him and seeing what he does next. I realized that Brad Pitt, the way he would portray Jack Conrad, that character really became, in a way, the protector. I saw him as the protector of cinema, in a way, the protector of good cinema, the potential, you know. And I really got to a place where I believed that for Jack Conrad, this artist, you know, he saw himself as an artist. It went beyond making money. It went beyond the film business. It was about, how do you make art? How do you make a lasting impression? You know, how do you make something that is that will be there forever?